I'm a neuroscientist at the University of Washington with appointments in the Department of Bioengineering and also in anesthesiology and pain medicine at the University of Washington. I'm also the executive director of the Center for Neurotechnology here at the University of Washington. I'm a neuroscientist by training, doing experiments looking about how the brain processes sensory information.
But before I begin with our question today, what does a neuroscientist do?
Lots of different things. There's lots of different types of neuroscientists. I'm an experimental scientist, so I do experiments in my laboratory. What I'm currently doing in my laboratory is I'm studying these little flatworms called planaria, which are amazing little creatures that have the ability to regrow themselves. But other neuroscientists study just about any part of the nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, nerves, diseases, looking for treatments and cures for neurological illness. Things like a stroke, spinal cord injury, schizophrenia, you name it, multiple sclerosis, blindness, auditory problems. So neuroscientists are working in laboratories and also in clinics to help people who have diseases of the nervous system and just discovering more about how the brain works.
Well, wonderful. You sound like the perfect person to help us answer this question. So our viewer Lucia, or Lucia, I'm not sure, she asks us, do we only use 10% of our brain? But before you get into that, once we went through our research and started looking around, and I started to remember, this has been mentioned in movies all over the place, that we don't use 100% of our brain, meaning that we're capable of doing so many, like, almost supernatural, superhero type of thing, lifting a lot of weight and whatnot. So please go ahead and help us clear this out. Is this even true? Is this remotely true? And where does this claim come from?
So that's an advertiser technique to get people hooked on a particular product or so. But again, a product, I don't know any product that allows you to tap into some part of your brain that's just sitting there doing nothing. That just doesn't exist.
Now, if this was true, that we only use 10% of our brain, what will that be like? Because I know that there's studies out there that show that our brain activity is like 100% at all times. But what would that mean if we were only using 10%? Like, what will our behavior be? Like, what will we be capable of doing or not if that was true?
Well, I think you bring up a good point, and that is, what does it mean when someone says, I only use 10% of the brain, or you only use 20% of your brain? You know, what does that statement mean? Some people will interpret that question as being that you only are using 10% of your physical brain, in that one part of the brain is active and that large part of your brain is just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something to happen. Sometimes when I mention that to people will say, oh no, that's not what I meant. Rather, what I meant is that we have the potential. We're only using 10% of our potential of what the brain could do. My response to a question like that is, how can that ever be measured? How could potential be measured? Certainly, we're always able to learn new things. We can learn new skills. We can increase our memory. We can, learn how to, do new tasks. So our brain certainly has potential, but it's not because we're tapping to some unused part of the brain. Rather, when we learn new skills, when we learn new information, the existing part of our brain rewires itself. It makes stronger connections between different areas of the brain. So it's not like our brain is all of a sudden waking up. Rather, we're forming new connections and stronger connections between areas, and that's how we learn new things and new tasks.
So is there such a thing as doing something or things that we can do to increase our brain activity?
Well, we can always learn new things. So when we want to learn a new language, for example, we're tapping into existing connections and making new connections between areas to help us learn. So certainly there are different memory methods that we can use, different ways to help people learn new things, associating different Senses could maybe help people learn new things. But again, it's not because we're tapping into a part of the brain that's not being used. Rather, we're using the existing brain in new and different ways.